But you thought it was on the air.
Oh yes, that was it, because I opened the door and I could see the monitor, you know, the thing.
That would have been the end of your career in those days, Soupy.
Oh, sure it would have been, you know. Certainly.
But now you're appearing here. You're also appearing where, Soupy? What are your future plans?
My future plans is to finish this show and go eat. Well, let's see. I finished Saturday night.
At the Red Timbers, right?
Red Timbers.
In Novi.
I go back to New York. I have 2 club dates next weekend. And then I go to Huntington, West Virginia to present this first annual Huntington Ha Ha, which is the evening of comedy at the Soupy Sales Plaza.
It's the Soupy Sales Plaza?
I just mentioned that a while ago. You know, you got to pay attention. We're having a good time here, Shirley. You should join us. I've been knocking my brains off. Shirley's taking a nap.
No. I'm so interested in you, Soupy.
Yeah, I don't mind you going to sleep and say goodnight first. Anyway, I have a movie coming out called Behind the Seams. It's a story about this guy who falls in love with this model, and I play a doorman, and he brings her Chinese food to get up, and I let him in because he brings me fortune cookies. And I don't pay attention to it. And what he does, he goes up and straightens up her apartment and everything, and pretty soon he's trying on her clothes, and it's a wild thing. Tony Randall, Danny Aiello, and Dick Cavett, myself, are in it. It's going to be premiered at November this year.
That's great.
And it's directed by Jack Fino, who won Academy Award for the special effects on Total Recall. This is the first comedy he's ever done, so it should be pretty interesting. And you know, I work all the time.
But we're going to take time off for a PSA, and when we come back, we'll continue this marvelous conversation, and perhaps you'll tell some jokes.
Okay.
We'll be back very shortly.
Thank you.
So, you and the gang are out cruising on the highway, all right? But, you know, they're fixing up a little stretch ahead there, so you slow down, you signal, you merge politely, and then some nuts whiz by, half in the bag. Wouldn't you just want to see them, whipped? But, ooh, those construction zones are dangerous. I mean, they could be shelled or crushed or spread all over the highway. Heck, they could be put behind bars or in a bag. Whew. Drive safely in construction zones. Don't be a nut.
Jack, I'm going to let you be our co-host tonight and ask Soupy anything he wants to tell us, but he's got to tell us the joke about the Chihuahua. Okay?
Okay.
Let's save that for the last.
Is that the last thing?
Yeah.
Okay. Soupy, you work with many great stars.
Yeah, that was a great thing about being in this business. You get to work with a lot of people who you always admire and are fans. Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Okay.
That's true.
I'm boring myself to death.
Go ahead.
Okay. Tell me the story about George Burns.
Well, George Burns was wonderful. George, you know, the reason he never came on the show to get hit with the pie is that he wore a toupee, you know, and he, you know, which is understandable. I had a couple of incidents with George. One was wonderful, was that in 1964-65, Joey Lewis proposed me to do the Friars Club, he and Al Kelly. And when he died, that was a big thing, because Joey Lewis was a very beloved comedian. He had grown up, you know, and he'd worked for the mobs in Chicago, and that's where he got his throat cut, you know, anything like that. And he was a wonderful guy. And so the funeral, they have the funeral in New York, and everybody's there. The Ritz brothers, Jerry Lester, Buddy Lester, everybody, Georgie Carl, everybody, Harvey Stone, Harvey Bellman, you know, everybody. And I was sitting there, and they showed me a seat, and we're sitting in the second row, and they sit me in the third seat, and the first 2 seats on the aisle are taped off. And George is sitting to me, he says, who are the seats, what are they taped? I said, I don't know. And in the meantime, people are going up and looking at the open casket of Joey Lewis, which I never liked. I like to remember people how they were. I don't want to see them when they're lying there. So, and the Ritz brothers are going up. George says they're probably going up to ask him if they can use some of the material. And he says, you know, when it's time to go, God will come to knock on doors and get your charts. It's time to go. It's okay. So all of a sudden, the service is about to start, and the door opens, and everybody looks over, and who comes to the door but Frank Costello, who at the time was the head of the Mafia of New York City. They tried to knock him off. And he's with Bill Rosen, who was married to Spike Jonze's widow, who had a couple of restaurants in California called Gatsby's. So they come and they sit down next to me. And all of a sudden I say, my God, it's like a scene out of something like how those flowers are going to part and the people are going to be machine guns. We're all going to get it. So it's Frank Costello, who was very revered and very powerful man. He sits down next to me, he says, he has voices, I think my voice is deep. He said, hey kid, he said, I watch on What's My Line. He said, I love you. I said, thank you. And George says, ask him, is he carrying a gun? And he says, what did George say? I said, he said, this isn't any fun. And he said, no, it ain't. He says, Joe, and I love Joe, you know, Joe's, I said, yes. And George said, ask me, is he going to kill anybody? He said, what did he say? I said, George said, this isn't a thrill for anybody. He says, I says, would you knock it off? You know, but that was one incident. But it's funny. I tell you, I did the Kraft Music Hall with Groucho Marx. And there was another classic, wonderful person. God, he was funny. See, the great thing is, if you're funny off the set, that to me is the test of a true comedian, if you're funny off. A lot of people, you know, like actors and people, like, you know, they go and they do it, and it's very mechanical. If you're funny, you're funny. Groucho Marx, we were doing the Kraft Music Hall called A Taste of Funny. We had a bunch of comedians, and he and I were co-hosting it. And he says to me one day, we were rehearsing, he says, would you have lunch with me? But he says, I want to treat you. I said, okay. He says, I'm going to take you to my favorite. And there was a chain of restaurants in New York called Schraff's that were the waitresses started out young, but they were now old ladies like your mother wearing tutus.
Okay.
And he always liked to eat at Schraff's because I guess when he and his brothers were on Broadway, that was an inexpensive place to eat. So I said, fine. So we walk into Schraff's on Broadway, and the waitress, she is like your mother in your tutu, and she says, oh, Soupy Sales. She said, my family loves you. I said, thank you. And she looks, she says to Groucho, aren't you one of the Marx Brothers? And Groucho says, I was getting ready to ask you the same thing. She slapped him in the face, and I fell down laughing.
Those are funny stories. But you're funnier than all of them.
Well, the reason because I'm alive.
Red Skelton, we had him here. He's also very funny. We had Red Skelton here, and he's older than you are.
I hope so.
Yeah.
You know, Shirley, whenever Soupy and I go to lunch or dinner, he's always, not cracking jokes, but his humor is so genuine. Well, this man is a funny, funny man. He's an artist. And we're privileged to have him tonight.
Oh, I'm honored. I'm overwhelmed. I'm honored.
I'm flattered.
I'm speechless. And, you know, I'm never speechless, but I'm speechless.
For you, that's a miracle right there.
I was going to ask you something else, Soupy. You performed for about 2 hours that night at Red Timbers. Now, do you write your own material? Where do you get your jokes?
Well, I write a lot of it. Once in a while, somebody else will submit jokes, which I pay them for, you know. But I find what I do is, you know, thing I can come up with doesn't bother me telling jokes. You want me to tell that chihuahua?
Yeah,
okay.
go ahead.
There is a guy walking down the street with a German Shepherd on a leash, and he runs into a guy he went to school with, went to high school with. He has a chihuahua on a leash, and they're out in the street talking about old times in school, the coaches, the teachers, and the kids. And the guy said, why are we standing out here like a bunch of idiots talking? Why don't we go inside the bar and have a drink or a sandwich, talk about old times? The guy said, we'll never get in because it's against the law to bring a dog to a restaurant. The guy said, follow my lead. So the two guys walk in the restaurant, and the maitre d' comes over and says, yes. The guy says, table for two. And the maitre d' said, I'm sorry, sir, I won't be able to see you. You have a dog. It's against the law to bring a dog to a restaurant. The guy said, this is my seeing eye dog. And the maitre d' said, oh, I beg your pardon. He says, right this way. He takes him, he sits him down, goes back to the guy with the chihuahua, and he says, yes. He says, I'm with that gentleman. He says, I'm sorry, sir, I won't be able to see you. You have a dog. It's the law to bring a dog to a restaurant. The guy said, this is my seeing eye dog. And the maitre d' said, seeing eye dog, sir, that's a chihuahua. And the guy said, they gave me a chihuahua?
That's so